Here's a weird question for you. What if our obsession with obesity in the fitness social media world is actually harming skinny people? Let me say that again. What if our obsession with obesity is harming skinny people? You want to follow my logic here? I was talking in a group of social media people who give a shit about fitness a week or so ago. And a bunch of smart people were talking about the fact that you can't determine someone's health status just by looking. There's plenty of people walking around with extra pounds who have great blood pressure statistics, great blood work for cholesterol and lipids, great endocrinology in general, and that focusing on those folks as if they're obviously having a problem is kind of wrong-headed, because you could do deeper tests than their scale weight or looking at their body fat percentage, and you could find out that they're actually doing pretty well. And some other smart person came in and said, yes, but we know that excess body fat is somehow related to problems, and we suspect that it's related to endocrinological problems. We suspect that at some point the system stops being able to deal with the excess body weight and develops issues. So just because we haven't seen any signs of a problem yet in these folks doesn't mean there's no problem. My response to that person was, you just made such a good point that it applies to things you haven't even considered yet. Because the statistics are already out there on the number of people at ordinary body weight who have endocrinological problems or high blood pressure, some other trouble that's building up in their systems, and we don't know why. You can't see it from looking at their body fat percentage, and you can't see it from looking at their scale weight. But if we're obsessed with only asking the question of who's at risk for future problems that we don't understand fully, problems that we're not sure how they actually develop, if we're obsessed, if we're married to the idea that we only have to do this and think about this when someone's carrying extra pounds, aren't we throwing people at typical body weight or underweight out into the cold and saying, we're not going to think about you at all? And I'll tell you, one of the many reasons this is a personal question for me is both of my parents were on the slender side for most of their lives. They didn't grow up in a society with easy access to food all of the time, not like we have it now. And they led lives that enabled them to stay within about the right range of weight for most of their lives. My father gained 10 or 15 pounds back in the early 1970s when he quit smoking, and he took it off over the next few years. My mother, in her late teens and early 20s, actually worked as a model for a while. She was just a skinny girl, and she actually took pains to stay that way. I would like to say that it was easy for her, but I actually know that there were times when she worked harder at it than you might have assumed, because she understood what happens to women who are not considered visually appropriate by the culture at large. So she took the steps that she needed to take to not have people come for her about her weight, and therefore she often tended to run skinny. Now, that may all sound fine for them. It may actually sound like they were lucky and privileged, and of course, in some sense they were. But have you ever met senior citizens who don't work on their health and fitness because they've been at standard weight all their lives, and they've been told that health and fitness is mostly for keeping weight off and losing weight, and they look at themselves on the scale and they look at themselves in the mirror and they say, well, that doesn't apply to me. I could do that because it's fun or I enjoy it, but I don't have to. Have you ever met those folks? Because that was both of my parents. Fit as fiddles up until their 70s, but nobody had ever given them the message that they might need to stay active beyond that in order to continue to age into their 80s well. And my father only made it to 81 and not in very good health the last 5 years. My mother, she's made it to 83 and she's not doing very well. And maybe we let her down by not giving everyone the message that fitness and exercise and health are important. Well, as long as we're just obsessed with obesity, we won't give that message. In fact, when I described my parents as fit as fiddles, what I was saying is a fib. They looked okay on the outside, and they seemed okay for the standard tests that somebody might run in a normal doctor's visit. But we all know, normal doctor's visits don't usually dig that deep. So this person in the conversation that I was in said, well, what if these heavy people are ticking time bombs and we should be intervening now? Yeah, that was true of my parents, even though they were at standard weight. My father had his first mini stroke at the same age I'm at now. He was 60 years old. By the way, I'm counting the days until I turn 61, just so I can say I made it a little further than my father before I started having a big problem. It's on my mind. The risk factors that they discovered for why my father had that stroke, well, he'd gone back to smoking a little bit. That sure didn't help. But he also had high blood pressure, and it was uncontrolled. And if anybody had ever talked to him about it before, they hadn't talked to him very firmly about it. I went through that too. My blood pressure was considered borderline starting around the time I was 18. I was still rail thin in those days. I hadn't grown into my full maturity. I was struggling to put on weight because my height had shot up so quickly in my teens. High blood pressure. Why? Don't know. But because I wasn't heavy, or because I looked normal, or because I seemed fine, it took 20 years, at least, until I was able to get a doctor to admit that maybe this was a long-term problem that we could be working on. And in fact, I had that conversation with my doctor after my father's stroke, because I said, the evidence keeps coming back that living with borderline high blood pressure for many, many years is a risk factor for strokes. I've got stroke problems all over my father's side of the family. Why don't we start treating this now? But I wasn't fat enough for somebody to have had that conversation with me on their own. I didn't look like somebody who needed this kind of information. I didn't look like somebody who needed this intervention. Oversights like that are an entirely predictable consequence of our obsession with scale weight and body fat percentage. And it may still turn out that body fat percentage really does have some kind of clear and direct connection to the problems that heavy people develop as they go through life. But that does not mean that everybody else gets to take it easy. It does not mean that everybody else is doing enough just because the scale isn't giving them a lecture. Both of my parents treated exercise as optional. They treated it as something nice to have. And as they got into their 70s, the muscle loss and the coordination loss and the other things that they could have potentially prevented by staying more active continued and continued and continued to catch up with them. Now, you can find a whole lot of people out in the fitness world, on social media, or in meat space who are offended and pissed off by discussions of fat phobia. Because they'll tell you, it's not a phobia. We're just talking about the evidence. We're just talking about the statistics. We're just talking about the public health consequences of not working on obesity. Great. When are we going to start talking about the way that skinnyphilia also blinds us? When are we going to admit that it isn't just heavy people where we can't tell their health by looking, it's everyone? When are we going to admit that there's more going on than meets the eye? When are we going to stop focusing on what we see or what the scale tells us and get smarter all across the board. I'm not seeing it, but I wish I did, because I lost my dad 2 years ago, and my mom and my stepdad are not doing well right now. But given how well they did for how long, and given how well I'm doing because I try to take care of myself, we're not even saying I'm succeeding, I'm just trying. They probably could have done better. They probably could be healthier right this minute. And it's actually kind of pissing me off that we don't have that discussion too. If you've made it this far in the video, first of all, thank you. Second of all, if this video or any of my others have entertained you, made you smile, taught you something, given you some support on your own journey for mental or physical health and fitness, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if that's too much of a commitment right now, please at least give it a thumbs up. Thanks for your time, thanks for your support, thanks for your attention. Go kick some butt, including your own, in a good way. Love ya.